You picked the wrong black woman to fuck with tonight. Before we dive into the raw, uncut story of how a 4-star general dismantled a corrupt city from the inside of a holding cell, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Ring that bell. Because you are not going to want to miss a single second of this fire. And drop a justice in the comments right now if you're ready to see the system get the shakedown it deserves. General Anaya Vance's voice is a blade, sharp and unwavering, as Officer Maddox wrenches her arm behind her back with a grunt. The cuffs bite into her skin, cold steel digging until a thin line of blood, dark as wine, beads at her wrist. Mouthing off to an officer, Captain Corbin says, his voice a low growl. He stands close enough for her to smell the stale coffee on his breath, his shadow falling over her like a shroud. That's how people like you end up with a world of problems. Vance's mind is a high-speed recorder, cataloging everything. Corbin's badge number, 2187. Maddox's nameplate, slightly askew. The jagged white scar that cuts through Corbin's left eyebrow, a permanent sneer carved into his face. Search her jacket, Corbin barks at Maddox. The frisk is rough, a violation performed like punctuation to his threat. They are clumsy, angry men, and they miss the encrypted field communicator, no bigger than a quarter, sewn into the lining of her coat. Get her in the car, Corbin snaps, his patience gone. A night in the tank will fix that attitude. They shove her forward, forcing her head down, as they cram her into the hot, cramped space of the cruiser. They still have no idea who they've just arrested. They see a black woman from the wrong side of town, and their imagination stops right there. The fluorescent lights of the processing room hum a sick, buzzing tune. The air stinks of old sweat, industrial cleaner, and the quiet desperation of 100 other nights just like this one. General Vance holds herself perfectly still for the mug shot, her jaw set like granite, her eyes level and burning with a cold fire that could melt steel. Click. The sound is final, but for her, it's just the beginning. Name? The booking clerk asks, his voice bored, his eyes glued to his paperwork. Anaya Vance. Address? She gives her address on Sycamore Drive, the one in Cypress Creek. The clerk finally looks up, his pen pausing mid-air. That's Cypress Creek, he says, his tone shifting from boredom to suspicion. She presses her thumb to the scanner, the black ink ghosting over her skin like a temporary stain. Behind her, near a stained water cooler, Corbin and Maddox are laughing. Their voices are loud, meant to carry, meant to intimidate. Another one from the creek acting like she's special, Maddox says, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Thinks the checkpoint rules don't apply to her, Corbin adds with a chuckle. We had to remind her where she stands, where she... Vance files away the words, the cadence, the smug satisfaction in their voices. She memorizes every watching face, every pair of eyes that sees her as a problem, not a person. Phone call? She asks, her voice calm and even. The clerk jerks a thumb toward a battered payphone on the wall. 1. Make it count. She dials a number from memory. It's not a lawyer, it's not family. A crisp, professional voice answers on the first ring. Operations Center, Pentagon. Authorization code Phoenix Talon 77, Vance says, her voice low and clear. Initiating Operation Sundown, transmitting current location. A brief pause hangs in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. Confirmed, General Vance, the voice on the other end replies, a switch flipping somewhere deep in the heart of the nation's military command. Response team is en route. Timeline 38 minutes. She hangs up the phone just as Councilman Julian Thorne sweeps into the station, radiating an aura of untouchable power. A championship-style ring, gaudy and gold, flashes under the harsh lights. More trouble from the creek? Thorne asks, peering through the glass at her as if she were an animal in a zoo. Corbin nods, eager to please. Just processing another one, sir. Resisting the checkpoint. Good, Thorne answers, his voice smooth as silk but cold as ice. People need to understand the consequences. The program is too important to be undermined. Vance is escorted to a holding cell. The steel door slams shut with a deafening clang, the sound of finality. She sits on the cold metal bench, her back ramrod straight, her face a mask of calm composure. The clock on the wall reads 9:22 p.m. In exactly 38 minutes, the entire world for these men is going to rotate on its axis, and they have no idea they're standing at the epicenter. 2 hours earlier, the sunset bleeds a violent orange over the rooftops of Cypress Creek. 54-year-old General Anaya Vance drives her unremarkable sedan through streets she knows like the back of her hand. The scenery shifts, the manicured lawns and two-story homes of the creek giving way to the sprawling mansions and pristine sidewalks of Sterling Point, the city's wealthier, whiter enclave. Suddenly, the dusk is shattered by the strobing slash of blue and red lights. Patrol cars form a chokehold on the road. A checkpoint. A shiver of something cold and familiar runs down her spine. This is it. She slows, her window already lowering. She's done nothing wrong. This should be routine. But she knows, and the Pentagon knows, that routine is a luxury not afforded to everyone in this city. Officer Maddox approaches, his flashlight beam skating across her face, lingering for a moment too long. License and registration. Vance moves with deliberate slowness, retrieving the documents from her glove box. May I ask the reason for this checkpoint, officer? Maddox stiffens, his jaw tightening. Routine inspection, now, he barks, snatching the documents from her hand. He studies her license, and his flashlight beam lingers on her address. Cypress Creek, he says into his radio, the two words sounding like an accusation. Requesting additional verification. The emphasis isn't subtle. It's a flag, a signal. Is there a problem with my identification, officer? Vance asks, her voice perfectly level. Wait here. Maddox walks back to his unit, conferring with another officer. They both steal glances at her car, sharing a laugh that doesn't reach her ears but whose meaning is perfectly clear. Captain Corbin steps down from a mobile command trailer, a king surveying his domain. Maddox points. Corbin nods, strolling toward her car with a theatrical slowness designed to communicate absolute authority. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. The word ma'am is a formality stripped of all respect. Why? My license is valid. Enhanced search protocol. Vance knows the law cold. She could teach a class on it. Enhanced searches require reasonable suspicion, Captain. What's yours? Corbin's jaw tightens. The scar above his eye seems to pulse. Out of the car. She complies, her movements precise and economical. For the record, she says, her voice clear enough for any potential recording, this appears to be a textbook case of selective enforcement. We decide what's selective, Corbin sneers. Hands on the hood. I do not consent to a search of my person or my vehicle without probable cause, Vance states, her voice ringing with an authority he is too ignorant to recognize. Terry v. Ohio and Delaware v. Prowse establish clear legal precedent. Look at this one, he mocks to Maddox, who has sidled up beside him. Thinks she's a lawyer. I'm intimately familiar with my Fourth Amendment rights, she replies, her gaze unflinching. Your kind always has to complicate things, Corbin says, the subtext hanging heavy and poisonous in the air. My kind? Vance raises a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Troublemakers, Corbin clarifies, but the word he really means hangs unspoken between them. Drivers in the other lanes are watching, their progress stalled. Some raise their phones, the small red lights of recording blinking in the twilight. Corbin notices and gestures angrily to another officer. "Clear these cars! No recording!" Vance mentally notes the officer's name, Doyle. She watches him move from car to car, intimidating people into pocketing their phones. She imprints faces, badges, license plates. Every detail is a weapon. "Last chance," Corbin warns. His face inches from hers. "Consent, or you'll be facing an obstruction charge." "I decline, and I am formally requesting a supervisor," she replies calmly. "I am the supervisor," he spits, the lie tasting bitter even to her. He signals to Maddox. "Detain her." Maddox twists her arm behind her back, a lance of sharp pain shooting through her shoulder. "Stop resisting," he yells, a performative shout for an audience that is no longer there. She isn't resisting. She is preparing a clean audio record for the transmitter in her coat. "I am not resisting," Vance says, her voice clear and steady for any listening ears. "I am complying under protest." Corbin leans in close. "You don't tell us how to do our jobs." She spots Maddox's body cam. The small red light blinks once, then goes dark. "Your camera seems to have malfunctioned, Officer Maddox," she notes, her voice laced with ice. "Mind your own damn business," he grunts, his grip tightening. Her training screams at her, muscles coiling with the memory of 100 ways to end this confrontation in seconds. Not tonight, not this mission. This is about endurance, not escape. "I will be filing a formal complaint against both of you," she says instead. Corbin laughs, a harsh, ugly sound. "Councilman Thorne oversees this checkpoint personally. Your complaint goes straight into his trash can." Her watch vibrates softly against her wrist. A silent signal. Evidence gathering continues. "Search the car," Corbin orders another officer. "Sir, without a warrant?" The younger officer begins, hesitating. "We have checkpoint authority under City Ordinance 33B, Corbin interrupts, inventing a legal justification on the spot. He knows the law, too, but only how to break it. "Anything?" he calls out. "Clean, sir." He frowns, disappointed. "Check under the seats. These Cypress Creek folks are always hiding something." Vance's thumb taps the side of her watch, activating the GPS beacon. Now the Pentagon is tracking her in real time. "Nothing, sir," the officer answers again. Corbin turns back to her, his face a mask of annoyance. He shifts his strategy. "You're still interfering with a lawful checkpoint," he says, trying to build a case out of thin air. "That's obstruction." "Invoking my constitutional protections is not obstruction," she answers evenly. The cuffs pinch her wrists, the pressure deliberate and punitive. "Anaya Vance," Corbin recites, savoring each syllable. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and resisting a lawful checkpoint inspection." A young woman in a nearby sedan is still recording, her phone held low, her face a mixture of fear and defiance. Their eyes meet for a fraction of a second. Vance gives the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. A seed has been planted. "You have the right to remain silent," Corbin continues, a bored monotone. "I'm aware of my Miranda rights, Captain," she interrupts. "You're transporting me to the Sterling Point station." He hesitates, thrown by her composure, her eerie lack of fear. "That's right. I will require my phone call there." "So, you'll get what we decide to give you," Maddox says, shoving her hard towards the cruiser. As they lead her away, Vance watches Officer Doyle redirect another car with a Cypress Creek bumper sticker for additional screening. 3 cars driven by white residents glide through the checkpoint, untouched. The pattern is established. The evidence is accumulating. Maddox shoves her head down, forcing her into the back seat with unnecessary violence. "Officer Maddox, badge number 3811, she says, her voice clear for the record. "That use of force was unnecessary." "Shut up!" he snaps, slamming the door. Through the window, Vance sees Corbin laughing with another officer, gesturing back toward Cypress Creek as if it were the punchline to a dirty joke. The cruiser pulls away. Vance sits quietly in the darkness, rehearsing the protocol she activated just minutes ago. Everything, down to the last second, is proceeding exactly on schedule. The interrogation room smells like stale coffee and regret. A single naked bulb overhead throws harsh shadows across a table bolted to the floor. Vance sits in an unforgiving plastic chair, her back straight, the cuffs still cinched tight enough to numb her hands. 2 hours tick by, each second a deliberate beat in a symphony of intimidation. The door finally opens. Corbin enters, carrying a thin file and her confiscated belongings, which he drops on the table with a theatrical thud. Comfortable? The smile doesn't reach his cold, dead eyes. She says nothing. Silence is a vacuum, and arrogant men always rush to fill it. He opens the file. Anaya Vance, Sycamore Drive, Cypress Creek, no priors. He looks up, trying to read her. First time learning about how checkpoint compliance works, is it? I will speak with my attorney, she says, her voice a flat line. Soon enough, he answers, circling the table with a predator's manufactured patience. I am invoking my right to counsel, Vance repeats, her voice level and unyielding. Corbin ignores it, a critical, documented error. We've got a problem in this city, he says, leaning against the wall, studying her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. People who don't respect authority. People who think the rules are for someone else. He gestures vaguely. These checkpoints keep Sterling Point safe. Some folks don't like being checked. Usually those folks have something to hide. Vance remains perfectly still. Resistance training had made this part easy. His psychological tactics wouldn't rattle a first-year cadet, let alone a 4-star general. Nothing to say? He flips through her wallet, pauses at a card, and lets out a short, derisive snort. Marine Corps General, 4 stars. He tosses it back on the table. Cute fake. That credential is authentic, she replies, her voice steady as a rock. Sure it is, Corbin laughs, and I'm the Secretary of Defense. His phone buzzes. He glances at it, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, and nods to himself. Our concerned citizens are here, he says, moving to the door. Through the thin walls, Vance hears a new voice, authoritative, impatient, dripping with privilege. Another one from the creek giving you trouble? Councilman Thorne, undoubtedly. Yes, sir, Corbin replies. Gave us the whole Constitution lecture. Had a fake military ID on her, too. A real piece of work. What branch? Marines. Claims to be a general, Corbin adds, his laughter bleeding through the drywall. Vance memorizes the cadence, the emphasis, the casual admission of prejudice. Every word is evidence. Corbin returns with Maddox in tow. Let's try this again. He slaps a pre-filled confession form on the table. Sign this. Plead to obstruction. You'll be out by morning with a fine. Vance looks at the document, then back at him, her finger still. I want my attorney present before I sign or touch anything. Maddox steps closer, positioning himself behind her, an attempt to loom. The captain asked you nicely, and I declined respectfully. You people from Cypress Creek think you're so special, Corbin says, his voice taking on a whining tone. The councilman's program has cut crime in Sterling Point by 30%. By targeting specific neighborhoods? Vance asks, her question a quiet challenge. Corbin's smile turns thin and cruel. By enforcing the law where it needs enforcing. Selectivity by another name, she murmurs. This interview is over until my counsel arrives. Corbin gathers her belongings, purposefully letting her military ID fall to the floor. He steps on it as he circles the table, grinding it under his heel. "This little costume of yours doesn't impress me," he sneers, picking the card up again. 4 stars. That's an ambitious forgery. He tosses it back down. Maddox presses his hands into her shoulders, a silent threat of violence. "We've got all night," Corbin says. "Plenty of time for you to reconsider that signature." A sharp knock cuts through the tension. The door swings open. A detective stands there, his professional expression shifting to one of alert concern as he reads the room. "Captain," Detective Marcus Cole says, his voice calm but firm. "A word outside?" Corbin hesitates, then nods to Maddox. "Watch her." The door closes. Urgent, muffled whispers ripple through the hallway. Another knock, harder this time. The door opens again. Cole enters first. Corbin follows, his jaw tight. Cole carries himself differently. He is observant, his posture squared away without any of the theatrical bravado. His badge is on a chain, his suit actually fits, and his eyes miss nothing. "Officer Maddox, they need you at the front desk," Cole says. It's a polite order. Maddox looks to Corbin, who gives a grudging nod. Maddox leaves, the room's atmosphere shifting palpably with his absence. Cole picks up the ID from the table, turning it under the light. "Captain, this has microprinting, holographic seals, and UV watermarks. It's real." "It's a good fake," Corbin insists, his confidence starting to fray. "No, sir," Cole replies, his voice respectful but firm. "I served for 8 years before I joined the department. This is genuine." Corbin's certainty thins like smoke. "Then she stole it. Add it to the list of charges." Vance watches the dynamic. Cole is something rare here, a man whose integrity is holding its ground inside a corrupted system. "Ma'am," Cole says, addressing Vance with a careful, deliberate respect that infuriates Corbin. "Could you state your name and rank for me?" "General Anaya Vance, United States Marine Corps." Cole straightens instinctively. Bearing recognizes bearing. "What brings you to Sterling Point, General?" he asks. Corbin cuts in. "That's irrelevant. She's being processed for obstruction." He turns on Cole. "I'm handling this, Detective." "Captain," Cole answers evenly. "Department policy requires immediate verification of active duty military credentials. Section 14 spells it out clearly." "I know the manual, Detective." "Then you know we're already off script. She requested an attorney twice and was denied. Questioning continued after she invoked her rights, and she's been detained for hours without proper processing." Corbin closes the distance between them. "Detective, you'd do well to remember your place." "My place is making sure procedure is followed," Cole says, his eyes never leaving Corbin's. He looks again at the 4 stars on the card, and this time he truly sees them. He takes a breath and recalibrates the entire situation. "Sir, these are 4 stars. There are only a handful of active-duty 4-star generals serving in the entire military." The interrogation room door swings wide open again. Councilman Thorne enters without knocking, a whirlwind of tailored silk, signature ring, and the smug weight of absolute power. "Captain, what is the delay?" he demands. "I expected this to be a routine process." His eyes land on Vance, cold and calculating. "Councilman," Cole says, stepping forward, "we may have inadvertently detained a high-ranking military officer. We need to verify her identity through the proper channels." Thorne scoffs. "Based on what? A piece of plastic?" "Based on security features consistent with a Tier 1 military credential, sir," Cole replies. "Verification would be a simple phone call." "Your concern is noted, Detective," Thorne says, dismissing him. "Let the captain handle his arrest." Cole doesn't move. Principles are hard things to outsource. "Captain," Thorne says, turning his back on Cole, "finish the paperwork and process her. Detective Cole, you're needed elsewhere." "Sir," Cole pushes, his career flashing before his eyes. "Standard protocol requires—" Standard protocol is what I say it is, Thorne interrupts, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The checkpoint program operates under a special city ordinance. My ordinance. Vance studies Cole. She sees the war raging behind his eyes. Ethics versus orders. A soldier's dilemma in a policeman's uniform. What's a man to do? What would you do? Drop a comment below and let me know. Because this is the moment where heroes are made, or good men are broken. Councilman, Cole says carefully, may I at least verify her identity through military channels? One phone call, that's all I'm asking. Thorne studies him like a puzzle with missing pieces. You're new here, aren't you, Cole? Transferred 6 months ago, sir. Then learn how we maintain order in this city. By violating constitutional rights? Cole asks, the question hanging in the air like a live grenade. Thorne's smile cools to absolute zero. By maintaining order. Don't overcomplicate your assignment, detective. The phone on the wall rings, its shrill cry cutting through the tension. All 3 men look at it. Corbin answers. Captain Corbin. He listens, his face slowly losing all its color. What kind of call? From where? His face pales to a pasty white. He hangs up the phone. Well? Thorne demands. The front desk is getting calls about a General Vance, Corbin says slowly, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. From who? The Pentagon. The room goes utterly still. Probably her friends playing a prank, Thorne says, but his voice lacks conviction. Corbin swallows hard. They knew her name, her rank. They asked why she was being detained at this specific location. Calculation replaces bravado on Thorne's face. Cole sees it too, the exact moment when Corbin's certainty shatters like cheap glass. Sir, Cole says quietly, do you realize who we might have arrested? Thorne silences him with a sharp gesture. Captain, verify this properly, now. Corbin practically bolts from the room. Thorne turns to Vance, his politician's mask back in place, his tone shifting to something oily and smooth. If you are in fact military, he says, then surely you understand the importance of security checkpoints. I understand constitutional rights, Vance answers, her voice like a chip of ice. And I understand selective enforcement when I see it. Thorne's practiced smile returns. Surely we can clear this little misunderstanding up amicably. Vance doesn't bother to reply. The wall phone rings again, insistent and unforgiving. Corbin returns, looking rattled. That was Colonel Jennings with the military police. They've confirmed her identity. She's General Anaya Vance. Excellent, Thorne recovers instantly. Then release the general with our sincerest apologies for the misunderstanding. Corbin swallows. There's more. They're sending representatives. Here, Thorne's veneer of control finally slips. What representatives? A military investigative unit, Corbin says, his voice barely a whisper. They specifically mentioned your checkpoint program by name, sir. Thorne looks at Vance, and the full, horrifying realization finally dawns on him. Tonight wasn't an accident. It wasn't a random stop. It was a summons. It was gravity, showing up to collect a debt. Vance meets his stare, and she says nothing at all. Nothing else needed to be said. Thorne moves to the door and closes it, as if a thin piece of wood could hold back the storm that was coming. What exactly is happening here? He asks, his voice tight with panic. Vance doesn't answer. Her mission never required a confession from him. Corbin's radio crackles to life. Captain, we have multiple incoming calls. Pentagon, Department of Justice, the Governor's Office. Handle it, Thorne snaps. Sir, Corbin answers, his voice trembling. They are all specifically asking about General Vance. Cole understands before Thorne does. He steps closer to Vance. Would you like the cuffs removed, General? Thorne glares. Detective, stand down! Cole doesn't. She's been verified. He removes the cuffs anyway. This isn't a game, Councilman, Vance says, her voice cutting through the panic. It's an investigation. Into what? Thorne laughs, but the sound is brittle and sharp with worry. Systemic civil rights violations, executed through discriminatory checkpoints, she replies, her voice ringing with the authority of absolute truth. Targeting minority neighborhoods, violating Fourth Amendment protections, establishing quotas by race and district. Thorne's face hardens. Those are absurd allegations. They are documented allegations, Vance answers. Corbin's radio crackles again. Captain, we have 3 black SUVs entering the parking lot. Military personnel disembarking. Thorne pivots to logistics, as if procedures could save him now. Release her, now, he orders Corbin. Blame the officers. Say it was a miscommunication. Corbin hesitates. Maddox was just following your protocol, sir. Cole steps forward, fishing a small key from his pocket and unlocking Vance's cuffs himself. My deepest apologies, General, he says, his voice formal and sincere. Thorne watches, alarm widening his eyes. Detective, he says tightly, prepare the paperwork for her immediate release. Cole nods but doesn't move. Now, Detective? In a moment, Cole replies. He turns to Vance. General, what happens next? Vance rubs the raw, red indentations ringing her wrists. Next, she says, her eyes locking on Thorne. Justice happens. Thorne laughs thinly. A misunderstanding doesn't require this level of theatrics. 6 months of documented civil rights violations isn't a misunderstanding, she replies. The Pentagon has been monitoring the Sterling Point checkpoint program since the day it was launched. We've been collecting evidence, building a case. She checks her watch. And tonight, that case is complete. Corbin's radio crackles one last time. Captain, they're at the door. Thorne heads for the exit. I need to make some calls. Your calls won't help you, Vance says. This investigation has federal oversight. Thorne's hand freezes on the doorknob. The political mask slips away, revealing the terrified man beneath. Cole moves closer to the table and lowers his voice. He slides a small, nondescript USB drive across the table toward her. Internal Affairs tried to look into the program. Doors kept closing. They buried everything. Evidence of direct obstruction? Vance asks softly. Cole nods. Everything I could gather. Checkpoint locations, arrest demographics, internal messages from the captain, directives from the councilman's office. The hallway outside amplifies the thud of heavy boots on tile. It's time, General, Cole whispers. The interrogation room door opens once more. A Marine in full dress uniform enters, flanked by 2 armed MPs. A silver eagle gleams on his shoulders. Colonel Jennings scans the room, his eyes pausing on Vance. General Vance, he says, offering a crisp, perfect salute. She rises to her feet and returns it. Colonel, she says, thank you for the prompt response. But we must rewind. Because the plan, the real mission, began long before the cuffs ever touched her skin. At sunset, when that violent orange bled across the roofs in Cypress Creek, General Vance chose the exact route that clipped the Sterling Point border, the invisible line where city policies rewrite themselves, depending on who's behind the wheel. She had already logged dozens of complaint affidavits, mapped the illegal stops by race, and traced the unconstitutional ordinance back to Julian Thorne's City Council Committee. Tonight was the fulcrum, the point on which the entire corrupt machine would be broken. She wore plain clothes, no ribbons, no stars, just a simple jacket with a hidden transmitter stitched beneath the lining, and a watch set to tell both time and truth. At the roadblock, Maddox played his part on cue. The flashlight lingered where it always does, on her Cypress Creek address, not her license expiration date. The call for additional verification. The smirks shared with another officer, the captain appearing like a curtain rising on a play he didn't know he was starring in. The first order, step out. The second, hands on the hood. She gave them every opportunity to choose procedure over prejudice, and at every turn, they chose power. The crowd watched and then was pushed away. The citizens' cameras dimmed. She made herself a metronome. Every action measured, every refusal documented, every escalation filed away in the muscles coiled behind her calm facade. Sterling Point Station was the second act of the stage play. Corbin thought intimidation was a tool he wielded. The bolted table, the bad lighting, the thud of a tossed file. He thought her silence was fear. It was bait. She asked for counsel. He pushed past it, a fatal error. He called her credential a costume. She made a mental note of where his heel fell on her ID. She heard Thorne through the paper-thin walls, heard the dismissive phrase, "Another one from the creek," heard the order to make an example of her. Maddox's body cam conveniently died, which meant the truth would need more eyes to see it. And that's when Detective Cole noticed. Not because he was naive, but because he had worn a different uniform once, and he knew the look of a real government credential under a lens. He didn't swagger, he checked. He cited Section 14 and the procedural steps they had skipped. He asked for a simple phone call instead of offering a knowing wink. Thorne tried to smother that spark of integrity with his talk of special ordinances and his manufactured authority. He didn't know Internal Affairs was already bumping up against doors he had locked from the inside. He didn't know a USB drive filled with his digital fingerprints would cross that very table just an hour later. And he certainly didn't know whose number General Vance had dialed from that grimy wall phone. When the Pentagon operator answered, Vance kept it simple. Authorization code, operation name, coordinates, no flourishes. Oversight Delta meant the documentation was already stacked high enough to block out the sun. It meant a team of lawyers who slept with one eye open. It meant she wasn't the only set of eyes on Sterling Point tonight. 38 minutes was more than enough time. Enough time for Corbin to overplay his hand, for Thorne to step directly into the trap, for Cole to test where his backbone ended and his badge began. Enough time for the neighbors, still stuck at that checkpoint, to become future witnesses, not just current victims. Back in the interrogation room, Thorne thought a smile could close the file. "We can resolve this amicably," he said, the way powerful men always say it when they smell the expensive perfume of liability. Carter laid out the charges the program had already earned on its own. Discriminatory stops, quota-based sweeps, a city ordinance stretched so far past its constitutional shape, it had snapped. He called them absurd. She called them documented. Corbin's radio kept muttering like a guilty conscience he couldn't shut off. Vehicles parking, phones lighting up, calls from people who could end entire careers with a single sentence. The room began to adjust to a new and unfamiliar gravity. That's when Cole reached into his pocket and used a small brass key to free Vance's wrists. The apology he offered wasn't for politeness. It was because he understood that chains should only leave marks when absolutely necessary. Thorne ordered paperwork, as if paperwork could cauterize a mortal wound. Cole asked what came next. "Justice," Vance said, because she preferred solid nouns over vague metaphors. Thorne tried to belittle the word. She reminded him that 6 months of data wouldn't fit under any rug. 6 months? He asked. She nodded once, and the room fell silent. But the hallway outside kept speaking for her. Doors thudded. Radios crackled. Outside, engines idled in disciplined military lines. Thorne's hand went to the doorknob like a nervous tick. Vance told him that federal oversight meant the knob no longer mattered. That's when Cole slid the USB drive across the table. A humble plastic rectangle, heavy with context. Messages rerouted, reports misplaced, memos rewritten to make inequity sound like efficiency. Administrative obstruction always looks tidy until the sunlight hits it. She asked Cole quietly if internal affairs needed cover. He said yes. Colonel Jennings didn't waste a single breath. Salute, confirmation, movement. He addressed Vance as general because titles matter, especially when cowards pretend they don't. The MPs behind him weren't there to menace, they were there to witness. Vance nodded once. The clock in her mind clicked down to 0. The first phase, consumed by arrogance, was over. The next phase, run by politics, was ending. The final phase, reserved for accountability, was starting now. Thorne stood straighter, smoothing his expensive jacket as if the cloth could become armor. Corbin just stared at the floor. What followed had been practiced in 1,000 briefings and written in 100 handbooks. Verification completed. Custody clarified. A federal inquiry was formally opened, on site. Vance didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She asked for the chain of custody on her personal belongings, for a record of every person who touched her ID, for Maddox's official incident report, and for the surveillance timestamps showing the exact moment his body camera blinked out. She listed potential witnesses by their shoes and their jackets, the ones she'd memorized from the nearby cars. Cole took notes like a man building a bridge to a better place. "Councilman Thorne," Vance said, her voice even. "I suspect you'll want your counsel present." He swallowed. "This is a misunderstanding," he said again, trying to shrink the universe down to that one single word. "Misunderstandings don't usually get a call from the Pentagon," Cole replied, not looking up from his notes. Corbin tried to steer the conversation back to calm. "General, if we made some errors—" "Errors are accidents," Vance said, cutting him off. "Choices are patterns." Jennings asked for a private room to begin interviews. An MP collected the station's sign-in log. The building itself seemed to be breathing louder now. Vance remembered the woman filming at the checkpoint, the furtive angle of her phone, the quick way she tucked it away when Officer Doyle barked at her. "Find her," Vance told Cole. "Video corroboration is essential." Thorne bristled. "We don't need outside footage to resolve this." "We do," Vance said, her eyes boring into him. "Because your officers terminated their own." The MP at the door didn't move, but the shape of the room shifted again. Cole got on the radio, asked for the vehicle plate list from the checkpoint, then for the contact number tied to the plate of the woman's car. "General," Jennings said, "we'll need your full, formal statement." "You'll have it," Vance replied. She recounted the stop in clean, precise lines. The approach, the immediate emphasis on her address, the escalation to an enhanced search, her explicit refusal of consent, the camera light dying, her invocation of counsel, and the continued questioning in violation of her rights. Cole added his own observations, the verifiable security features on the ID, the department's obligations under Section 14, and every deviation from protocol he had witnessed since she arrived. Corbin stayed quiet, counting backward to a series of decisions he could no longer unmake. Outside, tires whispered on wet pavement. The booking clerk peered into the room, his face pale around the mouth. "Sir, the governor's office is holding on line 2. Thorne didn't take the call immediately, which told Vance everything she needed to know. Power never likes to pick up the phone when the caller outranks it. Jennings nodded towards the hall. "We'll need a secure space to interview all personnel," he said. The MP at the door stepped aside. Cole asked softly, "General, Do you require medical attention for your wrists? Photographs first, Vance said. He nodded and signaled for a camera. Documentation breathes. Corbin stood there, finally seeing them. The red marks, the camera, the colonel, and began bargaining with himself. Vance watched the bargaining as if she'd seen it 100 times before. The symphony of if-onlys stacking up. If only the flashlight hadn't lingered. If only the line about your kind had stayed between his teeth. If only he'd really read the ID. If only he'd remembered the manual wasn't optional. Thorne finally grabbed the phone. Yes, Governor. Of course, he said, making noises of agreement without committing to a single noun. Cole's radio call got an answer. The young woman from the checkpoint, a student named Elisa Park, was willing to share her footage. She had seen enough to know that truth doesn't survive when it travels alone. An officer was dispatched to escort her to a private conference room. Vance requested that Detective Cole take her interview personally. Thorne objected out of sheer habit, then realized that every objection he made now sounded like an admission of obstruction. Jennings detailed one MP to accompany Cole as a witness. Another MP began collecting every officer's body cam for a full forensic review. Procedure, at long last, was finally walking upright. Vance asked for the printed text of Ordinance 33B and the city attorney's memos regarding its legal scope. Someone fetched a thick binder, heavy with rationalizations masquerading as public safety. She skimmed it, and then pointed to the sections where the word discretion became a funnel for bias. These phrases invite profiling, she said. This subsection pretends to be neutral while explicitly measuring compliance by neighborhood. Cole underlined the passages. Corbin said nothing. Thorne tried a different tack, one of reason. General, surely you see that checkpoints have value in maintaining order. Not like this, she said. The phones at the station's front desk kept up a steady, frantic staccato. A sergeant popped his head in. Colonel, the media are starting to gather outside. Thorne winced. Keep them back. Sir, we can't muzzle public sidewalks, the sergeant replied. Jennings asked for a secondary entrance to avoid a scene. We'll release a formal briefing later, he said, which meant there would be a record, not a rumor. Vance requested that Cole secure the evidence bag containing her wallet, keys, and phone, documenting the chain of custody from start to finish. He did. She pressed her palms flat on the cold table and took one deep, steadying breath. Maddox finally appeared in the doorway, flushed and out of breath. He froze when he saw the military uniforms. Officer Maddox, Jennings said, his voice flat. Please step in. Maddox's eyes flitted from Corbin to Thorne, then to Vance, who watched him without blinking. Where is your body camera? Jennings asked. The battery died, Maddox said far too quickly. At what time exactly? Silence reached out and touched Maddox's throat. I don't recall. We'll pull the device logs, Cole said from the corner. Maddox stared at the floor. General Vance alleges you used unnecessary force during transport, Jennings added. Maddox swallowed audibly. We'll be examining the transport vehicle's internal video as well, Jennings said. Corbin tried to deflect. Colonel, with all due respect, our department is already stretched thin. Then you should welcome any opportunity for clarity, Jennings said, his voice unyielding. Thorne cut in, trying to reassert control. Captain Corbin has my full and complete confidence. That's noted, Jennings replied, his tone as flat as a desert highway. Cole asked Maddox, did Captain Corbin instruct officers to prohibit civilians from recording at the checkpoint? Maddox looked at Thorne before answering, which was an answer in itself. Drivers were instructed to lower their phones for officer safety, he said, reciting a line. So, yes, Vance leaned forward. You understood that public recording of officers in the line of duty is a protected First Amendment activity, correct? Maddox's jaw worked. We needed to maintain control of the scene. Control doesn't outrank the Constitution, she said, especially when that control is exercised selectively. Thorne's temper finally flashed. General, you're not here to lecture my police department. I'm here because your department illegally detained me after I invoked my right to counsel, Vance said, her voice dropping, each word a hammer blow. You'd be surprised how many lectures stop writing themselves once that sentence exists in a federal report. Cole requested the checkpoint's stop and search data, broken down by a neighborhood. A clerk hurried off. A tech brought back a tablet within minutes. The numbers did what numbers always do. They spoke the unvarnished truth. Cypress Creek residents were stopped, searched, and detained at rates that made a mockery of the word neutrality. Sterling Point drivers glided through. This alone doesn't prove intent, Thorne said, grasping at straws. It proves effect, Vance answered. And intent has a funny way of introducing itself once it realizes effect isn't leaving the room. Corbin rubbed his temples. Cole asked for the names of all supervising officers present at the checkpoint, including Doyle. A dispatcher reported that Doyle was still at the scene, closing it down. Have him return to the station immediately, Jennings said. Elisa Park's footage arrived via a secure email link. Cole mirrored it to a large monitor on the wall. The audio was muffled by wind and fear, but the images were perfectly, damningly clear. You could see Corbin gesturing to clear the line of cars the moment phones appeared. You could see Doyle approach vehicles with his hand held out, a palm-sized stop sign for cameras. You could hear Maddox's voice yelling, "Stop resisting," while Vance's body remained perfectly still, her shoulders yanked up by someone else's hands. "This looks bad," Corbin said, his voice hoarse. "It looks accurate," Cole replied. "Accuracy is the point." The governor's office called again, this time asking for names, badge numbers, and percentages. Thorne stalled, then realized stalling was a currency that had just expired. "We are cooperating fully," he said into the receiver, his voice strained. As Jennings drafted a written notice of federal investigation, Vance signed her formal statement. Cole added a notation that she had requested counsel at 7:41 p.m. and again at 8:03 p.m. And that both requests were ignored. Maddox signed a chain of custody form with a hand that shook so badly he could barely write his own name. Corbin stared at his own reflection in the one-way glass of the interrogation room, trying to recognize the man looking back. "Councilman," Jennings said, "you will need to remain available for a formal interview under oath. We will coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office." Thorne nodded stiffly. "Anything else?" "Yes," Vance said. "Your Ordinance, 33B, will be reviewed for constitutional compliance by the Department of Justice. Expect a federal recommendation to follow." Thorne tried to summon one last shred of offense. "The city's crime rate has dropped 30%. "Cite your sources," Vance said, "preferably sources not authored by your own office." Cole slid a form across the table, acknowledging receipt of the federal notice. Thorne signed it like his pen had gained 100 pounds. Jennings turned to Corbin. "Captain, you will compile all checkpoint operational directives issued in the last 6 months, including all related emails and text messages." Corbin nodded, his throat too dry to speak. Cole requested the shift roster. Maddox said nothing. Doyle's unit crackled over the radio. "Checkpoint cleared, returning to station." Cole keyed the mic. "Officer Doyle, on your return, report directly to the main conference room." "Copy," Doyle answered, his voice unreadable. Vance asked the booking clerk to print the log entries since her arrival. The ink dried on the page like a timeline that had finally decided it wanted to be a map. The first reporter shouted a question from the sidewalk when the station door swung open for a patrolman. "Is it true a Marine general was arrested here tonight?" Thorne flinched, then pretended not to hear. Jennings arranged for a brief, formal statement to be read. An ongoing investigation. No further comment at this time. Vance didn't mind the silence. It kept the story from turning into cheap theater too soon. Cole returned from the conference room where he'd interviewed the student. Elisa Park will provide a sworn affidavit, he said. She has also identified 2 other drivers who recorded the incident. Thorne blinked. Witnesses have a way of multiplying when fear recedes. Vance thought of Cypress Creek, of the parents who had to explain to their teenagers why courtesy and compliance hadn't protected them last month or the month before. She pictured the tense block meetings, the coffee and quiet rage in church basements, the way that shared grief slowly, inevitably, turns into a plan. Because it has to. She didn't need to say any of that here. She had written it instead, 2 simple sentences in her statement about the true effect of their program. Fear reroutes lives. It reroutes futures until a map of a city starts to look like a cage. Cole read them and added a line of his own. Fear isn't random. It's a tool. Thorne just stared at his shoes. Doyle arrived, his knuckles raw from the evening air. He clocked the uniforms, the MPs, the colonel's ribbons, and understood instantly that the world had changed since he'd left for his shift. Officer Doyle, Cole said, did you instruct motorists at the checkpoint to put their phones away? Doyle's eyes moved, a flinch without flight. I told them recording was interfering with the operation. On whose orders? Command staff, he said, his eyes brushing past Corbin like a question he already knew the answer to. Did you document that directive in your activity log? Cole asked. Doyle shook his head. It was a verbal order? We will need a written summary of that order, Cole said, with names and times. Doyle nodded once. Thorne tried one last time to frame the narrative. General, surely you must agree that order has to be maintained. Vance didn't bother with sentiment. Order exists to protect rights, not to smother them. When it flips, it stops being order. Maddox, quieter now, said, We were told in briefings that Cypress Creek residents were running guns. By whom? Cole asked. Maddox hesitated. It was in the briefings. Produce them, Jennings said. If no such written briefings exist, we'll note that as well. Maddox's mouth opened and closed. Corbin stared at the floor. Vance watched Thorne feel the atmosphere in the room change from a solid to a gas. Cole's phone buzzed with a message from his contact in internal affairs. Prior complaints about the checkpoint had been referred back to Corbin's command, where they had died on his desk. He showed the message to Jennings, who simply nodded, as if cataloging the utterly predictable. Vance asked for a copy of Thorne's initial sponsorship memo for the ordinance. It arrived. It was full of language about the perception of safety. It contained very little about probable cause. Cole highlighted 2 lines that translated to quotas without ever using the word. That's not going to age well, he said, writing in his notepad. Vance requested to call her counsel now that the immediate fire had been contained. Jennings handed her a secure satellite phone. She spoke briefly, flagged jurisdictional issues for the legal team, and asked for a civil rights unit to contact community leaders in Cypress Creek before rumors could outrun the facts. She ended the call and turned back to Cole. Document everything. Names, times, who stood where. He nodded, already doing it. The station felt different now, like a building after an earthquake. The same walls, but all the angles were new. In the bullpen, a television flickered, the volume low. Thorne's aide slipped in, his cheeks flushed. Sir, the reporters want a comment. He whispered something else Thorne didn't want to hear. Thorne dismissed him with a flick of his wrist, then tried addressing Vance again. General, if the program needs adjustments, we can form a task force. The program needs accountability, she said, and then dismantling. Corbin looked up, startled by the word. Cole kept writing. Jennings spoke quietly to an MP who left to secure the station's evidence lockers. Maddox shifted his weight like a man just learning about gravity. Cole printed 2 copies of Elisa Park's statement and flagged the corroborating timestamps between her video and the station's own security logs. Synchronization matters, he said, mostly to himself. Vance signed a property receipt for her belongings, each item photographed and tagged. She asked for the evidence bag to remain sealed pending a federal review. Corbin agreed, because refusing would require a kind of courage he no longer possessed. Thorne's phone rang again. He let it vibrate itself out, then exhaled slowly through his nose. The young clerk who had taken Vance's fingerprints earlier poked his head in. "General, do you need a bottle of water?" Vance smiled, a small, real smile. "Yes, son, thank you." The kid returned with a bottle and a look on his face like his world had just moved an inch to the left. She drank and set it aside, the plastic creasing under her fingers. Cole finished his notes and closed his pen with a click that sounded like intention. "General," he said, "Internal Affairs will want your formal interview tomorrow morning." "I'll be here," she said. Thorne watched the door. Jennings checked his watch. "We will begin formal advisements now." An MP read Miranda rights to Corbin, to Maddox, to Doyle, and to the booking clerk, because true process doesn't discriminate when it's finally allowed to work. Vance stood, feeling the circulation return in a wave of warm needles to the wrists where the cuffs had been. She remembered the moment at the roadside when she could have fought back and chose not to, because strategy wins longer than strength. She looked through the glass. Beyond the lobby, cameras flashed. Umbrellas bobbed in a light rain that had just begun to fall. Cole's phone buzzed again. "2 more drivers just emailed their footage," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "Both of them show white motorists being waved through the checkpoint without being stopped." "Save and duplicate," Jennings said. "Maintain the chain of custody." Vance glanced at Thorne. "Councilman, those are the people you serve." He lifted his chin. "I serve the whole city." "Then you'll be relieved to learn that means them, too." The room didn't need volume to feel loud anymore. It had momentum. Vance picked up her statement packet and added one last sentence at the end. "Justice isn't loud. It is thorough. And if this story has gripped you, stay with it. Because this is where the real work begins. Support work that replaces fear with fairness. Subscribe to voices that don't just narrate the outrage, but report on the solutions. Whether you're commuting, working out, or just letting the dishes soak, choose content that adds some spine to your day. Follow, share, and turn on those alerts, because you're going to want to be there when the next chapter drops. Cases get cracked open, rights get restored, and systems get tuned toward dignity. This is Black Culture Story, where we bring justice narratives to life, voice only and focused, so you can keep listening while you keep moving. Your attention funds the stories that matter, and the people who have the guts to tell them. This is where accountability gets a microphone, and due process keeps the beat. If General Vance's fight found a place in you, pass it along. Because somewhere, someone needs the blueprint. Somewhere, a camera is staying on. Somewhere, a checkpoint is coming down. And somewhere, a kid is pedaling through a quiet morning without glancing toward a cone or a badge. Just a road. Open, like it always should have been.